I, Jean McKnight, Chair of the Planning Board, call this meeting to order at it's now 7:16 p.m. And as a preliminary matter, permit me to confirm that all members and staff, and believe at this meeting we do not anticipate other participants in the meeting. But I do want to make sure everybody is present and can hear me. So when I call your name, indicate that you are present. Ted Owens.
Here.
Adam Block.
Here.
And the chair is here. We anticipate our other two members, Martin Jacobs and Paul Alpert, will join us probably just in a few minutes. And I also want to acknowledge Planning Department staff who are present. Lee Newman, our Planning Director.
Present.
And Alex Klee, our Assistant Town Planner.
I'm here.
Mm-hmm. All right, then. I have a script to make sure that any persons, so that members know the protocols that we're following for these Zoom meetings, and any persons who wish to listen in will understand how we're conducting it. And I'll continue the roll call at the moment because we have another member joining us. Say present after I give your name. Martin Jacobs.
Present.
Okay. So this open meeting of the Needham Planning Board is being conducted remotely, consistent with Governor Baker's. Oh, and let me stop again. We have a fifth member who is now with us, and I'll say his name and indicate if you are present. Paul Alpert.
Present.
Okay. So this is being conducted remotely, consistent with Governor Baker's executive order of March 12th, 2020, due to the current state of emergency in the Commonwealth due to the outbreak of the COVID-19 virus. In order to mitigate the transmission of the COVID-19 virus, we have been advised and directed by the Commonwealth to suspend public gatherings. And as such, the governor's order suspends the requirement of the open meeting law to have all meetings in a publicly accessible physical location. Further, all members of the public bodies are allowed and encouraged to participate remotely. This order allows public bodies to meet entirely remotely for as long as reasonable public access, so long as reasonable public access is afforded, so that the public can follow along with the deliberations of the meeting. Ensuring public access does not ensure public participation unless such participation is required by law. Although there is a continued hearing on the agenda for this meeting, it's our expectation that that hearing will be continued and that there will be no discussion other than regarding whether the hearing is continued or not. So we do not expect that there will be public comment during this meeting. And for this meeting, the Needham Planning Board is convening by Zoom app as posted on the town's website, identifying how the public may join. And please note that this meeting is being recorded and that it appears that no attendees are participating by, and that some attendees are participating by video conference. Actually, all attendees are participating by video conference. Accordingly, please be aware that other folks may be able to see you, and take care not to screen share your computer unless that is intentional as part of the meeting. Anything that you broadcast may be captured by the recording. All supporting materials that have been provided to members of this board are available on the town's website, unless otherwise noted. The public is encouraged to follow along using the posted agenda, unless the chair notes otherwise that we are changing the order of items on the agenda, which I don't expect we will do tonight. Now, we will soon turn to the first item of on the agenda, but before we do, permit me to cover some ground rules for effective and clear conduct of our business and to ensure accurate meeting minutes. I will introduce each speaker on the agenda. After they conclude their remarks, the chair will go down the line of members, inviting each by name to provide any comment, questions, or motions. So please hold such until your name is called. Further, please remember to mute your phone or computer when you are not speaking. And please remember to speak clearly and in a way that helps generate accurate minutes. For any response to comments that are made by anyone, please wait until the chair yields the floor to you, and in that case, to state your name before speaking. And finally, each vote taken in this meeting will be conducted by roll call vote. So, turning to the first item on the agenda, and that is actually called for 7:30 p.m. Yeah, I wonder if maybe we should wait until 7:30 p.m. for the first item on the agenda, which is the 390 Grove Street definitive subdivision. And just what would be best to take up next? The special town meeting zoning articles, that should be pretty quick. So in our agenda package was the final draft of the town meeting articles. I reviewed them and I saw that changes were made consistent with our votes at our last meeting. I just wanted to say just the most minor thing, if there still is occasion to make any change at all. On page 3, the spacing between subsection little a, little b, and little c, I thought our custom was to have spaces between those paragraphs, A, B, and C. So if that is our custom, the rest of the article does have spaces between such paragraphs. So I thought maybe we'd like to have them there too.
I can probably make that edit in the draft of the warrant when I get it.
Okay. Lee, is there anything more to be said or done with regard to the articles? Well, I guess what we need to do is vote our recommendation. Do we decide to recommend to the town meeting that we support this start of his?
Jean, I believe we already handled that at the last meeting. I think what I wanted to accomplish at this meeting was to determine who was going to be doing the presentation on the articles, and to update the board a little bit about what I understand is going to be the procedure on Sunday, October 4th. Okay.
Well, why don't we start with who's going to present? I presented the last time we had an article at the town meeting, and it was recorded in advance. It was a presentation recorded in advance, but I was available, of course, to take any questions that arose during the meeting. I understand, and Lee was probably intending to mention this too, of course, that we will be provided with a separate place to sit, hopefully a table, so that if we need to confer among ourselves, as we usually do at town meetings, if any amendments are offered, we will have the opportunity to do that. Adam, you had your hand raised, so I call on Adam Block to respond to, presumably on who will present the article and any arrangements.
Thanks, Madam Chair. I'd like to volunteer to present at this one. So that was my volunteer duty.
Mhm. Well, then why don't we,
What's that, Paul?
does everyone concur with, let me ask, I don't know if we need a vote or just general agreement.
General,
General agreement, all right. Is there anyone who disagrees with Adam's offer to present the article?
Adam.
All right.
I
So
saw
here-
his hand go up, and I was planning to say before he could speak that Adam's hand is up. He must be volunteering.
Yes.
But it turns
indeed.
out I was right.
All right. Well, I'm doing this in like the careful way, you know. So therefore, Adam, thank you very much for volunteering to present the article. And Lee, and of course, there are two articles, the one also on the map change. And Lee, you were going to tell us more about the arrangements.
so what I understand, I'm going to be getting some more detailed descriptions from the town manager. They're still starting to work out the details. But just so, from what I understand, the protocol is going to be similar to the protocol at the last town meeting that we held under COVID. And that is that the presentations will be recorded and they'll be uploaded to the town's website. And then questions will come in from town meeting members, and we'll answer those questions on the articles, and we'll post our responses. And what's different is the last time around, we just made a recommendation on the zoning article. We weren't the actual proponent, so I think our role is going to be different than it was at the last town meeting. So Kate had indicated that she was trying to come up with an arrangement where the school committee would have a place to sit, the selectmen would have a place to sit, the finance committee would have a place to sit, and the planning board would have a place to sit, so that we are able to talk to each other and address any questions that come up, or any motions to amend that might happen on the articles. And that as the details of exactly how it's going to be implemented become available, I'll share that information with you.
And Lee, I have a question to start with. Typically, we call a meeting, we publicize that we have a meeting just prior to the town meeting. I mean, by just prior, I mean like a half hour or an hour just before it opens. Will we be doing that? Is there any necessity?
Yes, I would recommend that we do that. We did that at the last town meeting, and I think we should do it this time. The question is, how we'll do it, whether we'll all be together. I think those are the logistical details that need to be resolved.
That's right. I'm reminded that we had a Zoom meeting. That's right. Maybe it was a few hours prior to the start of the annual town meeting. And then we continued that meeting as we always do, so that if we needed to convene again during the town meeting, we had already called that meeting and it had been continued.
Right. And so I imagine we'll follow that same protocol again.
Does anybody else have any question or comment about the town meeting presentation? No?
I may separately call on individually members of the board for for some guidance in preparation of the remarks, some on substance and some on style, I guess. I want to make sure that on the one hand, we lift the words of the text out so it's plain and easy for people to understand and to be able to vote on, and obviously to get the support of town meeting as required. And I also want to just think through what some members of the town meeting may object to, and try to have and think through, I guess, what you would call an objection handler. So, we're ready in the moment for whatever we can plan in advance. Sometimes, we just can't plan for a wingnut kind of out of left field comment or motion, but it would be helpful to get some of your experience.
Yeah, Adam, as always, you definitely want to give a lot of thought to the visuals you want to use, because that's important to a lot of these members.
Yes, that's what I meant by style. That's right, Marty.
Well, I think, Adam, there's a pretty good narrative description on the technical components of the article, actually in the warrant.
Yes.
And of course, we have all the materials that we got from the
Right.
proposed developer that maybe would make sense to also present in terms of how a narrative on what the zoning does, but some just generalized information about how it might actually effectively be implemented.
Do we have? Do we know if LCB will present or will be asked to present at town meeting?
They would not be asked to present. This is our article.
Right. Okay. Okay.
No, occasionally, yes, Mr. Alpert has a question.
I was just going to comment that if you want to, Adam, you can yield some of your time to a representative from the developer if the developer wants to, or say Roy Kramer or Evans Huber wants to present. They would have to do it on our 15 minutes, but you could call on that. You could ask the moderator to let them speak.
That's a really good point. What I thought I would do is put a skeleton together of the presentation, and then confer with you guys, and then with enough time in advance to separately confer, probably with Roy or with Evans, and see if there are other comments that they want to ensure that are included, and whether or not they would prefer to make a comment. I don't want to overcomplicate it, and yet, it's a valid point, Paul. And optically, if there's some message that's better to come from them than us, that's fine. Or would it be inappropriate if we are getting questions on some of the technical, legal language of the bylaw, to be able to actually confer with Roy and Evans while we're conferring among ourselves?
Yeah, I don't see why not. Well, if we get written questions, we can prepare a response and confer with them on how we're proposing to respond to the questions. Sure.
Yeah, let me comment when Lee mentions written questions. I'm just going back to the way the prior presentation was done. Town meeting members were encouraged to submit questions in advance, so that people would be prepared to be able to make those answers. That doesn't mean that people still, can't be recognized. They can, of course, be recognized at the meeting by the moderator to ask questions and make comments. And I think it's perfectly appropriate if it's a question that can't readily be answered by the planning board, but can only be answered by the developer or the developer's attorney or engineer, to turn to that individual and ask. Now, to have somebody speak who is not a resident of the town, isn't there some complication with that?
Roy is, I think, a resident of the town.
He is.
Yeah.
He's also a town meeting member.
Yes.
And he's well to a lot of the town. So, I don't think it's a negative to have him speak.
Yeah. But, isn't it true, Lee? I'm just trying to remember so many town meetings. I should know this by heart. But if we were to say that we wished to ask the developer's engineer to respond to that question, and we would have to say to the moderator, and the moderator would have to say to town meeting, may this person who is not a resident of the town speak. Isn't that correct?
Yes.
Yes, that's correct. That's if the question surfaces at town meeting. But if it comes in terms of written form before town meeting, I think we can just coordinate, get the right answer.
Right. Yes.
If I may.
Yes, Paul.
Yes. I also want to point out to Adam that at the public hearing, the developer had some artist's renderings of what the building would look like, especially from from different angles, like from Highland Avenue or across the street from Highland Avenue, which I thought were very good to show. And you may want to have that as part of your presentation to show that that fourth story is really set back and will not be obtrusive from really any of the angles.
If I can, it's an excellent point, Paul, and I'm glad you mentioned that. My ultimate goal is to be able to combine video with some of these still photos or documents as still photos and have some of the narrative run while there's a picture demonstration. And in other words, I may call a reference to something and I'd like to be able to highlight it or underline it or make a specific mention to something. So that way, if it's just me talking to a camera and then a bunch of pictures, it's a bit kind of distorted. And I want it to be a good, easy, seamless flow. So I do intend to incorporate and interact with the materials. And I would talk, so I'll reach out offline to talk a little bit more about the substance. We want to talk a little bit, a very brief mention of the history of the place, its, prior use, I would imagine, the economic benefit, the intention of this use being somewhat less use than the prior use was. And then obviously the addition of the, and the restrictions of the fourth floor, and why ultimately we as the board support this and are looking for the town's support and endorsement.
Adam, one thought. If you go back to our support of the transit-oriented development that we liked and promoted next to Roach Brothers,
Yes.
one of the objections that some people had was that, well, it was promoted by the developer. So I wouldn't be surprised if some people have an objection to this as being, well, it's really being pushed by a developer.
That's an excellent point.
So I would be prepared to deal with that objection.
Yeah, and thank you. That was Mr. Jacobs speaking, and I would, just as far as planning for this, I'm supposing that Adam Block contacting another member to ask for advice about the presentation is not, something you can't do under the open meeting law. But it does occur to me that we might put this on the agenda so that kind of let's round it up kind of discussion we could have at our next meeting, which would be in 2 weeks and would be ahead of the town meeting. Do you think the timing would work for that, Lee, to have another discussion?
I need to get a confirmation on when they want to put up the videos. Remember, the videos went out at
Yes,
the town meeting. So Adam,
that's true.
I need to get you a date on what the expectation is in terms of when the videos need to be done.
Right.
Okay, and other question is, if Adam desires some technical help from town staff for putting together his, video of himself speaking with the, photos and sketch plans and so forth, who will help him with that?
Well, both Alex and I can help, and Cynthia, the communications manager,
Oh, yes, Cynthia, yeah,
can help.
she's very helpful.
Yeah, I was gonna say, this is Alex Klee, Assistant Town Planner. Just Adam, that board members historically have used different levels of help from our department before, either kind of doing it totally independently or telling us what they wanted to see in a PowerPoint, and then we would kind of make it. So you just keep me and Lee posted on how we can help you and how, independent you want to be versus, collaborative, just so we're happy to help. So just wanted to make sure that you knew that that's on the table, and we'll just leave it to you to decide how it's needed.
Thank you very much. My first intention, I think, is to lock down the core messages, the skeleton, and then I'm going to think through this style. And then there may be some things, whether it may be an issue of, potential some objection handlers we may want to address in advance, and other objections we may anticipate, be well thought through and reasoned, and then express and handle the objection live at town meeting. Because I could see, for instance, some people thinking, wait, if we're just zoning one geography, isn't this regarded as spot zoning? So, and as well, Marty, the objection that you raised that, once again, the planning board, and we'll talk through that strategy. And Alex, I'm grateful for your assistance, and I'll take you up on that as I get a little farther down. But I think I have somewhat of a handle on where I'm going, and I'll confer with you guys offline for further direction.
Also,
Sounds good. All right. Lee, go ahead.
I've reached out to the finance committee to see if they want us to come in to talk to them about the zoning articles. I'll let you know if they do, and if so, what the date would be.
Do we have an early indication from them if they're supportive of this, or if they have any additional questions about this?
I haven't heard anything, and so I've reached out to Louise. I know Roy did a presentation in front of them not long ago, but I haven't heard. Nor customarily, I'm contacted by the finance committee. We go into one of their meetings, we answer all their questions, and then they generally vote their position. But they haven't reached out to me, so I've reached out to them. Maybe because the applicant was in meeting with them, it's kind of, the process has gotten a little sidetracked. So I'll let you know.
All right, and Lee, a question, and then I'll turn to Paul, who has a question, but mine is, who would be meeting with the finance committee? Would it be just Adam, which of course is fine, or would you think it, excuse me, say?
It would be the chair and vice chair.
The chair and vice chair, okay. Because if we actually had 3 people, we'd have to post it as a meeting of our board. So, all right, Lee. So that meeting would be chair and vice chair. Paul Alpert has.
Yeah, I'm just, no, I don't have a question. I'm going to volunteer to give a call to Roy Kramer to find out what happened when he presented to the finance committee, and what questions the finance committee posed to him, and I'll report back to Adam.
You might be able to watch the finance committee meeting. It was recorded on Zoom, and you could hear the whole conversation of what transpired.
Yeah, that's a good
To
idea.
be honestly, it'll be a lot faster if I just call Roy.
Okay.
I don't have enough time to actually go
Alex,
watch the whole finance committee meeting.
Alex and Lee, could you actually send me an email, please, with the contact people that are the equivalent of you, Alex, and Clay for FinCom? Because I may ask them to send me the link if I can't easily see it, although, it'll be helpful, Roy, and Paul, we can expedite it by understanding what Roy reports back to you.
Well, Lee or Alex, I question whether you can simply go ahead and send that link to Adam.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. I can easily just send you the link, Adam. Lee would have the contact information. I don't have that, but I can probably send you the link before this meeting is over.
Okay. All right. Are we all set with that agenda item of the special town meeting zoning article? All right. Well, if we are, then it's time to move back to the number 1 item on our agenda, which is the continued public. Oh, I am reminded of a step that I missed, and I'd like to take that step before we open the continued public hearing. And that is, typically with these Zoom meetings, we vote to continue this meeting to our next meeting date with the same Zoom ID. and our next meeting date is September 22nd, 2020. And the meeting, are we thinking of 7:15 for that meeting, or are we moving to a 7:30 timeframe, Lee?
7:15.
So it would be 7:15, just as tonight. And with the same Zoom ID, if any technical difficulties arise at this meeting that keep this board from completing this meeting tonight.
So moved.
Is there a movement? Mr. Jacobs moved for the was it Mr. Jacobs? Did I hear
Yes,
right?
that's right.
Yes. Who moved for the continuation? Do I have a second?
Second.
Mr. Block has seconded. So we'll take a roll call vote. All in favor? Mr. Owens, are you in favor?
Aye.
Mr. Block,
Aye.
Mr. Jacobs,
Aye.
Mr. Alpert,
Aye.
and the chair is aye. So we this meeting will automatically continue if technical difficulties prevent our going on with it. So now for the public hearing on 390 Grove Street definitive subdivision. And I turn to our planning director, Lee Newman, to explain where we are in this process. And I understand there is going to be a recommendation for further continuance.
Yes, we have received actually a request for further continuance from the applicant of the subdivision. At the last planning board meeting, we had asked to have some additional information prepared on a revised subdivision submittal, and we have not received that documentation yet. I understand that they wanted to do some additional soil testing at the intersection of the new road and Grove Street, and that hasn't been done yet. And so the revised drawings haven't been prepared, which is one of the reasons why they're asking for the extension. The other reason is that they are discussing with the neighbors to the subdivision a potential solution that would lead to a withdrawal of the application if they were successful. So in order to enable them to continue with their conversations with the neighbors about a solution that would be amenable to both parties and allow the subdivision to effectively be withdrawn, or in the alternative to develop a revised set of drawings which address the concerns that were raised at our last hearing. They've asked to have the hearing held over until November the 4th. And they've requested an extension in our action deadline that would run into December the 31st of this year. So there would be two motions the board would need to make tonight. One is to accept the continuation until November the 4th, and the other is to allow the action deadline on the subdivision to be extended to December 31st.
I move to accept the postponement to November 4th.
Mr. Jacobs has moved to accept the continuation of the hearing to November 4th. Is there a second?
Second.
Mr. Alpert seconds. All in favor? Mr. Owens?
Aye.
Mr. Block? Oh, I should have asked if there is any discussion. I'm sorry. And I wondered with the hand raised by Mr. Block if perhaps he had a question or comment.
I did. Thank you, Madam Chair. Just before my vote, I just wanted to make you aware that there is an additional attendee on our meeting known by the name of Brittany Ling. And I was not sure if they were here for the purposes of the public hearing and before we took action. I wasn't sure.
Seen that. Let me go to participants. No, I don't see that on participants. Where would I see that?
Under attendees.
Oh, okay.
On the top right, under participants, there are panelists, 8 panelists and 2 attendees.
Oh, attendees, right. Okay, sorry. There we have.
So I can actually speak to that. This is Alex Klee again.
Yeah.
Brittany has, I think she's with a law firm that's working with some of the abutters, and she's just been kind of following the status. I don't know if she'd like to speak. She hasn't raised her hand, but Jean, if you'd like me to allow her to speak, I can.
Yes, if Perhaps Ms. Ling would raise her hand if she wishes to speak. And I mean, raise your hand electronically. No, she has, let's see.
She has not raised her hand.
There, the hand is raised, so she would like to speak. And this is a hearing, so we will allow her to speak, and will you arrange for that, Alex?
Yep, she can, and she just has to unmute herself.
I believe she is unmuted now.
Hello.
Yes, hello.
Hi. Yes, my name is Brittany Ling. I am with the Abutters Council. I was just tuning in to this webinar just to check the status. I've been following up with Alex just to see what's going on, and we just felt if one of us was watching this meeting that we could, properly keep up with everything that was going on.
Okay. So you did hear the motion was made and seconded to continue this hearing to November 4th, 2020. And I was just calling for a vote. And so there's nothing more, Ms. Ling, that you wish to say at the moment about that?
Correct.
Okay.
Thank you.
So I'll go back to the vote. Was there a question or comment further? No, okay. So all in favor, Mr. Owens,
Aye.
Mr. Block,
Aye.
Mr. Jacobs,
Aye.
Mr. Alpert,
Aye.
and the board is also aye, so that motion does pass.
I move to extend the action deadline to the end of the year.
Second.
And Mr. Jacobs has moved to extend the action deadline to the end of the year, December 31st. Mr. Block has seconded that. Is there any discussion of that motion? Hearing none, I'll go to the vote. All in favor, please say aye. Mr. Owens,
Aye.
Mr. Block,
Aye.
Mr. Jacobs,
Aye.
Mr. Alpert.
Aye.
The chair is aye, so that motion is approved to continue the action deadline to the end of the year. All right, so that we have dealt with that item one on the agenda. So the next item is the Board of Appeals. Three matters on the Board of Appeals agenda for their upcoming meeting. I believe the meeting is September 17th. The first in 107 Lexington Avenue, the applicant wants a third car garage, and under our zoning bylaw, 2-car garages are allowed by right, but a third garage requires a special permit. I do have a comment about this, but let me see if anybody else has a comment about this. Is there anyone else who has a comment or question?
Not me.
No, nobody. All right. Well, what I'd like to say is I went out and drove by this site. It's, there have been other houses in the vicinity who seem to have been tear downs and reconstruction. This one is still an older, sort of Cape style house. But if you look at the plans that were included in your packet, you'll see that the two cars part of the house, of the garage, will stick out from the house. In other words, it's one of those poking out garages. Then the third garage on the extreme left, if you're facing the front of the new house, would be back only about 2 feet from the other two garages. But the whole garage business will be right out there out front. I didn't see any other 3-car garages in this neighborhood. This is a 10,000 square foot zoned neighborhood. This lot is, looking for lot size on the
I think it's just over 13,000 square feet, if I remember correctly.
Oh, yeah, there it is, lot area 13,000. So it is slightly larger than the minimum lot size of 10,000. But personally, I just don't like this. And I don't know whether you want to say anything or leave it up to the Zoning Board of Appeals or what they think looks good in the neighborhood. But this poking out garages and having 3 of them, I'd like to say that if others support it, that the planning board is not in favor of a 3rd garage with such a configuration. Is there any support for that position?
I think if they're otherwise conforming to the zoning rules, I can't remember what they're making. They're making a request for relief to add the 3rd bay to the garage. That's correct?
Yes, with 3rd door and the garage addition. I mean that part of the house will have a room or something above it with a what do you call those windows with the points.
I mean, but is the big issue that it's going to be living area square footage above the garage, or is the bigger issue the 3rd garage?
To me, the biggest issue is the way the house presents from the street, with the door and the entrance to the house being set back, and the garage is out front. People who've served on the board with me for a while know that I just don't like that. So
Is that a design thing? Like, in other words, I don't know if we have a place to interfere in the private sector and their right of, private property to make a decision and how, as long as it's a lawfully erected structure, that we really have a say necessarily in the style, unless it's going to, damage the style of the area. Or another problem.
if the zoning board of appeals were to deny the 3rd garage, the other 2 garages presumably would poke out. So you're right about that, Adam. But the 3rd garage, it still complies with the side lot line requirement. It's 15 feet from the side lot line, the 3rd garage. But it just makes it worse, it seems to me, this poking out garage, that's all. And it is discretionary to the Zoning Board of Appeals to make a decision one way or another as to whether they want 3 garages. So Mr. Alpert had a question or comment.
Well, when we were considering, at the request of the planning board, having a zoning amendment to allow for 3-car garages as of right, I did some driving around myself at the time, and I hate to disagree with you, Gene, but I found that I did not have an aesthetic problem with garages that were jutting out from the house. I found most of them that I saw to be not unpleasing. I was kind of neutral to them. They didn't offend me. Now I know that there are some zoning articles that allow for approval by the Zoning Board of Appeals. If I may have said zoning amendments, I meant zoning articles. If the Zoning Board of Appeals finds that it's not detrimental to the aesthetic of the neighborhood. And I'm wondering whether this is that kind of a matter, and I'm wondering whether it would be not inappropriate. I hate to use a double negative, but I do it all the time. Whether it be not inappropriate for the planning board to just make the comment that we request that the Zoning Board of Appeals give special consideration to how the aesthetic presentation of this design with these 3 garage bays will fit into this neighborhood.
I would be very happy if we would make that comment, just pretty much as you had presented it. Mr. Block has a question or comment.
And they intend to knock down the existing house and build a whole new house, correct?
Yes.
Probably already being built, isn't it?
What's that?
I wouldn't be surprised if it's already being built.
No, it's not. The
No?
other day I drove by and it's a little cape.
I mean, I have my own feelings about how certain garages are designed and so on, but I really feel like it's a matter of the private market to determine if a builder thinks there's demand for the design of a garage in a certain way, and you know, that builder will know if there is market demand by putting it out on the market, and if it sells or doesn't sell. I would think that there'd have to be some level of injury to the town in order to deny the relief if we provided that relief in similar circumstances elsewhere, especially.
But that's really the question that Paul is getting at. When he says he wants the ZBA to consider whether the design aesthetic would be substantially different from that in the area. I think that's the point that Paul's trying to make.
I mean, I know Lewis Wolfson has built a couple of homes around the corner from here. They're large homes on similarly sized lots that have, large, I don't think, they're not 3-car garage. The ones that were built, they're 2-car, oversized 2-car garage. I think they're probably 600 square feet, maybe. Off High Street. So I mean, I've seen 2. This is a question with 3 cars.
Right.
And I see the point, and it definitely will start a trend in the area.
Yes. Well, I think, are you finished, Adam? I don't mean to cut you off. I see Mr. Owens wanting a question. Yeah, Mr. Owens.
So I like the wording that Paul has come up with. We're really just calling their attention to this issue. Normally, I would agree with Adam that I would allow the marketplace to make its own decisions about this. But we do know that there are other places in the country where the front of the house is all garage, and that you have to walk down a long, narrow path to find the front door somewhere behind the garage. And I think of Chicago, for example. I think of San Diego. Chicago, they do it so they don't have to shovel the driveway. San Diego, they do it just because they don't have any space. And I think that can be a very detrimental look if you have a whole neighborhood. And I believe that the architectural term, if I remember, because we discussed this when we were discussing the large house, is it's called a proud garage, not a garage that sticks out, but a proud garage where the garage extends beyond the front of the house so that what you see from the street are just garage doors. Now, I haven't driven by this, so I can't comment, but if that's what they're doing here, if they're going to have 3 garage doors protruding out from the front of the house so that when you drive by, all you see are the 3 garage doors, I think that is unattractive enough to require us to make a comment on that. So, Paul's wording, I think, is perfectly neutral. It's not saying, we don't want you to do this. We're saying, we'd like to make sure that you're considering this aspect of it.
All right. Look, I'm looking at the plan, and it's about half of the frontage of the house would be the 3 garages, and the other half would be other components of the house. So it's about half and half, but that still is unusual to have that much of the front of the house be garage. So it sounds like we have a bit of a consensus here. Could we say, and Lee, would you be able to get from the recording of this meeting the wording that Mr. Alpert gave? And I will ask if somebody would move that we adopt that, and ask our planning director to send correspondence to the Zoning Board of Appeals consistent with that wording.
I'll make that motion.
Right.
I'll second it.
We have the motion made by Mr. Jacobs, seconded by Mr. Alpert. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, I call for a vote. All in favor of that motion, say aye. Mr. Owens,
Aye.
Mr. Block,
Aye.
Mr. Jacobs,
Aye.
Mr. Alpert.
Aye.
And the chair is aye, so that motion is adopted. All right, so the next part of the zoning board is Baker's Best. And it is a catering company at 150 Gould Street. Does anybody know if Baker's Best is in any way related to Bagel's Best? I was just curious.
They're not.
Okay. I drove by there. It appears that the entire small building is devoted to this caterer, unless there's something in back that you can't see from the front. And parked in the lot are the vans that are used for the delivery. There are not a great deal of parking spaces. And, what's being asked for in the way of relief is relief from the 10 parking spaces per takeout window or takeout counter. Because what they want to do is not only deliver food by van, but allow people to come and pick food up at the takeout counter or takeout window. And what I wonder is, and of course they present that there are so many difficulties with the COVID emergency that we're in right now for their business, that this would be a way of keeping their business going. What I'm wondering is whether this should be considered a temporary approval or a temporary waiver of the 10 space requirement, whatever the relief is. I didn't make a copy of what was in our packet, but it really worried me that there is not a lot of parking out in front of this building. And I wonder, I'd like to ask Planning Director Lee Newman if she has any view of this, or has seen it, or has any ideas about the extent to which there'd be a parking problem if this were to be allowed permanently. Lee, you are muted.
I don't have specific, information on the nature of the parking and how it's functioning on that site, but I would imagine that would be what the Board of Appeals would consider when they were considering this application, and they would be getting testimony and documentation on that, the information that we don't currently have because we're not running the public hearing on this.
Do you think a suggestion that the Zoning Board of Appeals might consider relief on a temporary basis would be delving too far into their what's really under their control and work? Paul.
Yeah, my recollection from reading the application is that they're presently doing this on a temporary basis by way of the selectmen having given them the authority to do this on a temporary basis. They have not, and that's about to expire at a certain time. This is, from my reading of the application, at the present time, a COVID-related request because their business has fallen off because of COVID, and they have been able to survive. Might not be too strong a word here, during COVID by having had this short-term ability through the select board to do this. I don't know whether under our bylaws, we or the zoning board of appeals really have the authority to give temporary special permits, essentially, is what we're doing. I mean, we can give special permits. We cannot give special permits. I don't recall seeing anything that allows us to do temporary special permits. And they're going under the bylaw and asking permission because they're not sure right now whether the select board is going to extend their ability on a temporary basis to continue to do takeout. I would like to see us help small business survive this COVID crisis as best we can. I would especially like to help Baker's Best simply because I love their food. I think they do a great job. I want to see them survive. Jean,
Well-
you said that you drove there, and there are parts of Gould Street that are more residential and less commercial, and there are parts of Gould Street that are more commercial.
That's true too. I didn't actually mention that in my comments, but directly across the street from this establishment are single-family homes. And then farther, I would say up the hill toward Highland, then it changes to commercial. But the direct environment is single-family homes right across the street.
And Paul, you're right. They are, although they may or may not have it renewed by the select board, this would effectively be a permanent change. And they're looking effectively, I think, to make a significant investment into the building that will enable them to, on a short-term basis, drive more business in an innovative way. And on a second hand, it would be, I would expect that they want to continue it after it's over. I don't know if I think they're the sole tenant of the building.
That was in the application, yes.
That was
If I remember correctly.
Yes.
So they're cannibalizing their own parking for themselves. And so we are, it is a significant change to their parking, and there's no way, even the attorney calls this out in his covering letter, if I remember. So there's no way that the zoning board would not recognize the consequence and implication of both the residential properties across the street and the parking on site. That it would be.
So you're suggesting, Mr. Black, that we wouldn't be bringing anything to the attention of the Zoning Board of Appeals that it wouldn't already realize from the application?
Because it's already entered into as evidence on the record of what they're trying to do, why, and the implication it will have on parking.
Mr. Alpert suggests that a special permit that is limited as to time is somehow not allowed under the state law or our zoning bylaw. I'm not sure that is true, actually.
I'm not sure it's true either. I just raised the issue.
Yeah. And I guess all I was suggesting is that we encourage the Zoning Board of Appeals to consider whether the relief that is sought be granted with an end date, rather than be a permanent change.
One additional note, Madam Chair, is that we and the Select Board, I think, have taken a number of steps to support small business throughout town in a similar way, providing temporary release because we generally are in a state of emergency of a kind, certainly economically. So Lee, I don't know if there will be other applicants that have appeared before us that may also look to extend their relief, or if that's going to be granted by, if that particular relief will be granted by the select board. But it's just a note that, you know, we can expect more of these kinds of considerations before us and ZBA, you know, for the next, you know, probably 8 months.
Well, Lee, have you heard any suggestion that there may be such applications coming to us?
I'm not aware of any. I think we were trying to manage this through the selectmen so that there wouldn't be a permitting process that people had to go through in order to enable them to function under COVID on a temporary basis. I think the whole goal was to try to avoid this statutory process for people to the extent that we could.
And we went along with that. We adopted a policy ourselves that's supportive of that with regard to any conditions we may have attached to take out or so forth. Yes, Mr. Alpert.
Well, then let me suggest getting back to similarly like we did on Lexington Street, kind of asking the Zoning Board of Appeals to give special consideration to something. I would suggest that we ask the Zoning Board of Appeals that if the relief granted is not temporary, if it's going to be permanent relief, that they give special consideration to the effect of any additional traffic would have on the residential neighborhood that abuts this property.
Right. Very
believe-
good.
And I deliberately worded it that way because if the Zoning Board of Appeals feels that they can do it temporarily and they do grant a temporary permit to do it, I've got no problem with that whatsoever. And I would love to see them go ahead and do that. But if it's going to be permanent, let's make sure that they are considering the residential neighbors and making sure that they're not adversely affected.
Yes, I very much like the way you put that. I wondered if we wanted to ask, assuming there is parking allowed on that street, if in addition to the word traffic, you might add parking, because people do get concerned about parking in front of their houses and in there. Do others, would somebody like to make that in the form of a motion or referring to that language, and then we can seek comments or further comments on that motion?
I'll make it a motion.
Okay, and is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, second the motion. All right, is there further discussion of that motion? No further discussion. All right, then I call for a vote. And I'll ask our planning director if there was sufficient guidance in the wording that Mr. Alpert gave originally that would inform the letter that you would write.
Yes, it's fine. It's sufficient.
All right, then with that said, a call for a vote. All in favor, say aye. Mr. Owens.
Aye.
Mr. Block.
Aye.
Mr. Jacobs.
Aye.
Mr. Alpert.
Aye.
Chair is aye, so that motion is adopted. All right, I didn't see, I don't know if, I didn't see anything to comment on at 100-124 Second Avenue, wanting the dentist office wanting to go in. Does anybody else have anything to say about that application?
I did not. I would move no comment.
All
I
right,
would second that.
second motion. All right, so there is a motion and a second for no comment. Any discussion on that motion? Hearing none, we'll go to a vote. All in favor of no comment. Mr. Owens.
Aye.
Mr. Block.
Aye.
Mr. Jacobs.
Aye.
Mr. Alpert.
Aye.
And the chair is aye, so that's a unanimous vote in favor of no comment. So we have dealt with the Board of Appeals agenda. There are no minutes that are in final form for, that have already been reviewed and revised for us to adopt. 2 sets of minutes were sent out. I reviewed them, but I don't really have any questions for the board about them. But I just didn't have time to send them along to Alex and get them in final form. So that will be, they'll be back before us at our next meeting. That's it on minutes. And now on correspondence, I think we do have minutes. The letter, yes. Lee, would you like to discuss the 770 Chestnut Street A&R and the letter that you sent to the town clerk about our vote? You're muted, Lee.
Sorry about that. Yes, I just wanted to copy the board on the actual correspondence because your vote basically enabled, I think, a withdrawal without prejudice, provided we received a formal letter requesting that under a certain timeline. And we did not receive any such letter. I reached out to the applicant. The applicant had indicated that a letter would be coming the next day. It wasn't. I reached out to the applicant by email and let him know exactly how the board had voted and received no response from the applicant. And I informed Jean and Paul of this. And so when we didn't receive a letter formally withdrawing the application, I notified the town clerk that the application had been denied, because the board statutorily has 21 days to act on this, or it becomes an approval by default.
At our prior meeting, did we actually take the vote to deny it if the letter wasn't received?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes, we did.
good. Okay.
And it was a wise move, as it turns out here. All right, so any questions about that and that process? We're all set with that. I want to mention that we had a chair, vice chair meeting last week, Paul Alpert and I, and with the participation of Lee Newman, and we met our new economic development manager, Kate Fitzpatrick, and we actually talked with her for a good hour, and I think she's going to be a very helpful addition to the town. And Mr. Black, I'm sure you've met her already through the Council of Economic Advisors.
Yes, I was part of the interview process with Lee and the crew of others, and I was certainly very impressed with her. This is a woman who had been part of a nonprofit that focused on commercial activity in Dedham Square and how to be successful. Given Legacy Place had taken over so much of the commercial activity, or was going to, and she seems to have all the skills. In my conversation with her, some very savvy marketing backgrounds. She's very smart. She's a town meeting member, in Dedham. I've had conversations with her since. We've already started to work together. She's already helped with some minutes and of the last 2, I think, CA meetings. I think she seems to be a fantastic addition to the town staff. I'm very excited to have her and to work with her.
Yes, and it will be helpful to have her on board as we move forward with the, the Gould Street, Muzzy and site with the zoning for that. We also discussed a bit the traffic study, and also discussed with her her views on multifamily housing and the extent to which multifamily housing supports commercial development in the downtowns of our towns, such as Dedham, Needham. So yeah, it was a very satisfactory is there anything else anybody wants to say or ask about Kate? Excuse me, Amy Hilson. All right. So Paul Albert, our member, had a couple of things he wanted to mention. And would you like to begin that? One was
Sure.
tree bylaw, and the other was the warrant articles, the Community Preservation Committee warrant articles.
Yes, I under report from board members, there are two items that I felt I should be reporting to the board on, and Jean mentioned the first one, so I'll start there, which is that there are Community Preservation Committee warrant articles that will be presented to town meeting, and I am the planning board's representative on that committee, so I suppose I should be informing the planning board of what's going on there. We had our public hearing on the warrant articles last week, and we're having a meeting next week where we'll be voting on the warrant articles. So let me give you a brief rundown of what they are and where I am personally on.
Excuse me one sec, Paul. We're hearing some loud noise. Does anybody know where that's coming from?
I don't hear it.
I don't hear it now. Nobody else heard it?
Oh, I did, Madam Chair. Paul, it's possible, are you moving papers around near your
Yes,
computer?
I am.
That's the call.
Possibly it's near the microphone.
Thank you, Adam.
Okay.
I'll stop.
All
Okay.
right. Go on, Paul, please.
So briefly, we have two articles from two of the churches in town under historic preservation, requesting funds. One from the First Baptist Church to do some work on the exterior columns and surrounding exterior areas to that. I have recused myself on that one because there are some legal documentation that they are negotiating with the town, and another lawyer in my law firm represents the First Baptist Church and will be representing them on those matters. And so I recused myself on that. The second one is the First Parish Church, who were looking for some funds. Let me just back up a little bit. The First Baptist Church is looking for about $92,000 from the town, which is about a third of the project. They had originally come to the town last year looking for the town to pay for practically their entire project. And the Community Preservation Committee said, no, we need more. You need to have more skin in the game. So they've pared that back. First Parish Church is looking for, I believe, about $25,000 to do some repair work to the steeple. I am generally, which by the way, they point out that even though it's called a steeple, it's really more of a clock tower. There's a Paul Revere clock that is, no, it's a bell tower. There's a Paul Revere bell in that tower. They're presenting it as preservation. I'm not going to make up my mind on how I'm going to vote until the last minute, because the Community Preservation Act is kind of specific that we're not supposed to be using town funds for regular maintenance. And I am a little concerned that they're really asking for funds for maintenance, like painting. I want to get some more clarity on that I'll get at the meeting before I vote one way or the other. If I'm convinced that it's not maintenance, but it's preservation, I will vote in favor of it. Mm-hmm. We have a request, a very small request from the community farm for some funds to help them expand their bed areas. I think it's about $10,000. I'm going to skip down to one that is a new project that is coming because of COVID. We have a request, I think, for about $150,000 to help fund, and I say help because I think it's about a third of what's going to be used as emergency rental assistance. So this will fall under the affordable housing bucket to help tenants who are having difficulty because of COVID pay their rent, to supply funds to help see them through the crisis. And I'm totally in favor of that. Then there are two articles that are being presented by Park and Recreation. One for Claxton Field, and unfortunately, I don't remember the dollar figures on these. One for Claxton Field for the lighting and for what they're calling skin renovation, which is helping to preserve and renovate the infields at the baseball and softball fields. And the other is at the Fazio, resurfacing the synthetic track. We did get some pushback from town meeting members at the public hearing, people who were saying they're fully in favor of the rental assistance. They don't see the need for paying for these Park and Rec projects, and perhaps we should be diverting funds from Park and Rec and paying more to rental assistance. It was pointed out to them that it's not a zero-sum game. We have funds where we can support both. But I am personally, what's the word I want to use? Probably miffed, because I've been on the Community Preservation Committee now for, I'm in my 6th year, that it seems to me that Park and Rec seems to be using community preservation funds kind of as its personal piggy bank. I don't see them going to the town to fund their projects through the general budget at all. It all seems to be through community preservation funds. And so I am thinking about voting no, at least on the resurfacing, just to give a little bit of pushback, because we are running low on funds in the general bucket. We do know that the town will probably be coming to community preservation for large funding for the renovation of Emery Grover, which will fall under historic. In addition to the presentation that the school board has given to the planning board, they gave a presentation to community preservation where they told us that the way they look at the budget, they could be asking community preservation to fund as much as $11 million towards the renovation of Emery Grover. That's a lot of money from the community preservation funds that we have, and we would probably have to bond it, which would be considerable. Whether we go that route or not will not be on my watch. I am term limited. I'm in the last year of what I am allowed to be on the Community Preservation Committee. You guys next April are going to have to replace me. Somebody will need to replace me, and this will not be coming before community preservation within the next year. But I raise it again because of Park and Rec. We have to be looking forward to some of these projects like Emery Grover, and possibly saying to Park and Rec, you guys have to slow down on using community preservation funds. So before I go on to the next topic, if you guys have any comments, if you guys have any direction that you want to give me, your thoughts on things that you want me to consider before I vote, I'm your representative to community preservation. It's, I listen to you.
Mr. Block, you want to be recognized. Go ahead.
Thank you. A couple thoughts. One, Lee, are you aware of the Parks and Rec department effectively trying to use conservation funds as their piggy bank? And I know we have a new Parks and Rec person, Um, Curious if they've talked about this and why they're not presenting it through general funding.
I don't. I haven't been involved at all in Park and Rec's funding in front of CPC, so I have no opinion one way or the other.
Well, it certainly seems to make a ton of sense to speak to, Parks and Rec and or someone from FinCom or the select board to, to understand what's going on. I don't know if someone just sees a pot of cash and they're intentionally trying to do it outside of general funds for that reason. But it's worthwhile, I think, to investigate. It doesn't seem to be prudent for, if it's not an ordinary course of business, for a town department trying to take advantage of conservation funding, which is used and intended for a different purpose.
If other members don't immediately have a comment, I'd like to respond both to Adam Block and also to Paul Alpert's suggestion that he might vote against the field spending on the DeFazio synthetic track. I did a bit of a study looking at how the town had spent its funds since the state law was changed, the Community Preservation Act. Initially, the Community Preservation Act only allowed, it had affordable housing and historic preservation and open space. And open space was defined, so it's really was conservation land. Acquisition, preservation, creating trails, that sort of thing. Then the law was changed to allow the community preservation funds to be used for outdoor athletic facilities. And in this town, that changed everything. Since that time, and it might have been about, by now, maybe even 6 years ago, when that was it about 6?
Maybe more.
Maybe even more. But the hardly any money has gone to conservation land acquisition or conservation restriction acquisition or upgrading of trails. I mean, it's not zero, but there hasn't been very much. The rail trail was a significant project that was helped with those dollars. But a lot of money has gone to the fields, the various fields. And I don't think Needham is unusual in this regard. I think if you studied how other towns are using this money, you'd probably find exactly the same thing. But I certainly would support Paul using his own judgment, I'm not saying he must, but voting against this funding with the idea that we need these funds, not necessarily saying they should be used for conservation land, but that there are other town needs coming up and he's concerned, and as he said. Any other comment from anybody else? Oh, I just want to say one more thing. When Adam, in response to what Adam said, Adam seemed to be suggesting that Needham should have discussions with other department heads. I think Paul's vote would speak for itself if he does vote that way. I don't know that there needs to be any discussion among department heads about it. Mr. Alpert, yes.
No, I just want to clarify for Adam about how funds are allocated for open space and whether these park and rec funds are really coming from open space. There are 4 buckets that we're dealing with. There's an open space bucket, and and every year the Community Preservation Fund needs to allocate 10% of its funds, at least 10%. We usually do 11% of its funds for the open space bucket. There is an affordable housing bucket. So similarly, 10%, usually 11% goes into that bucket. There is an historic bucket, and our 10% is still being used to pay annually the debt service on the renovation to Town Hall, which is from the Historic Commission bucket. So there's really no money left in that bucket the 10% goes to pay that bill. So the remaining 70%, give or take, is the general bucket, which can be used for any of those other projects. All of the money that has been funded for Park and Rec has come out of the general budget, the general bucket. So none of the Park and Rec money has come out of the 10% per year that has been set aside for open space.
Thank
That
you
has
very
continued
much
to
for
grow.
that clarification. Appreciate
But
it.
what it is doing is that it is taking money away from the general bucket that could be used for open space, for affordable housing, and for other historic funding, such as the 2 church applications that we have now that are coming under historic. But because there's no money in the historic budget, those will come out of the general bucket.
What does FinCom say?
I don't know. Actually, FinCom, the presentation to FinCom, I believe is tomorrow night. So I don't know what they're going to say.
Well, I think what I'm hearing you saying is that Park and Rec's requests are not inappropriate, but that maybe the CPC members need to consider as a policy matter how much of that 70% should go to things like Park and Rec projects. And it hasn't happened.
Exactly.
Yeah, thank you. That was Mr. Jacobs with that comment. Mr. Owens.
Yes.
Yeah, so just to follow up on what Marty said, it isn't that they're doing anything inappropriate. They're just being a little crafty. And here's a source of cash, and other people aren't lining up for it. And so they're being aggressive and lining up for it, which they will continue to do until CPC slaps them on the hand.
Okay.
Yeah, that's about, that's a good way of saying what I was trying to say. Yeah.
So it sounds like we're generally in agreement with the approach that Paul Albert explained to the meeting that he's going to be attending soon
Okay.
to make decisions on these projects. Is that correct?
Yes. Thank you. I appreciate all of the input that I've heard tonight. Now, on the second issue, when I joined the planning board 5.5 years ago, we were in the throes of the Rockwood Lane project. And so we, as a planning board, were considering putting together a tree bylaw. And one way or the other, the tree bylaw discussion left the planning board. I was accusing of having it being taken away from us, and I got slapped on the hand saying, no, it wasn't taken away from you. But it did migrate away from the planning board and go to a tree bylaw committee where it seems to have died. And there is a parcel of land near my home on my running route, or my regular jogging route, which Ted, you might see as you drive to work, on the corner of Central Avenue and Country Way, where a developer has purchased the property, torn down the house, and totally clear cut the lot. There's not a tree left. And if, as you all know, I live in a part of town that is zoned residential A, and we have a lot of very mature trees that probably predate colonial America. And when I jogged by this lot the day after it had been clear cut, I was incensed. And I made a phone call to Mo Handel, who is now the chair of the select board, and accused the select board of taking away the tree bylaw from planning board. That's where he slapped me on the hand and said, we did not take it away from you. But still, I had a very with Mo, and he suggested that we have vice chairs meeting, Jean and myself and Mo, and Matt Borelli as the vice chair, and see if we can revise the tree bylaw committee and get the tree bylaw discussions back on track. And so I wanted to report back that I am actively working with Jean and with Lee to set up that chairs, vice chairs meeting and hopefully get the tree bylaw committee back on track and get a tree bylaw in Needham.
Very good, Mr. Uppert. Could you briefly explain what the concept of a tree bylaw is and what other towns have done so that anybody listening in understands what we're
Oh boy, it's been 5 years since we looked at this. I know Wellesley has a tree bylaw from what I understand is very workable and could be used as a workable guide for us. I know Newton has a tree bylaw. In my law practice, I have had some complaints from Newton residents that the tree bylaw in Newton is too strict. But it is another bylaw that we can examine. But basically, it would discourage developers from my point of view, it would discourage developers from taking down mature trees or taking down a lot of mature trees, that they would be kind of forced to leave some mature trees on lots where they have a tear down. Query whether we want to go to how much we want to regulate the taking down of trees by private homeowners and not just developers. I know Newton does that. I don't know the extent to which Wellesley regulates that. We would not be prohibiting the taking down of trees. I believe that what the bylaws generally do is if you take down more than the allocated percentage or number or however it's worded, then to take down more, you have to make a monetary contribution to a town fund that will be used to replace trees within the town. So that we're not going, we can't, I think the theory is we can't really prevent people from taking down trees, but we can have them make a contribution to this fund if they're going to take down trees beyond a certain level.
Okay, well, I look forward to working with you and to the chair and with the chair and vice chair of the select board to see if we can move this forward for further consideration. At this time, are there any more comments or questions about Paul's work on this? All right, then, well, after we have that chair vice chair meeting, we'll report back to the planning board. And that takes care of our agenda, unless another board member has something to raise. Yes, Adam Block. You're muted, Adam.
I apologize. Thank you very much. I just wanted to ask a couple of questions on some things. Going forward on these kinds of things, I'm happy to just ask the chair or vice chair. But I remember some time ago, and I can't recall if it was at a time when I had become elected and officially serving on the board or if it was prior, but Attorney George Junta Jr. had an applicant who was interested, I think, in changing some zoning along either Kendrick or Hunting, that area, to go either from single residence A to single residence B. Mm-hmm. It was subsequently, I can't remember, Lee, if that was continued or what the case was. What's that?
He withdrew it.
He withdrew it.
At the urging of the selectmen, I believe.
So I have a feeling that that's going to come back. And I thought that we should probably schedule some time, or I don't know how logistically we do this, but we should schedule some time among ourselves to consider what kind of a policy on how we want to handle that, and something similar if it's possible in other geographies. I know that the history of this has to do with the relocation of 128. So there's a very particular scenario here, and yet I would just love an opportunity to understand from each of you what your perspective is, on making that change, what the benefits are and what the consequences are. So that was one item. Another item was I wanted to find out, Lee, if you knew anything happening with Highway Commercial 1 or with that subcommittee for next year.
Yes, actually, I just had a meeting this morning actually with GPI and Tony Delgazo. So they're in the process of doing the first component of the traffic study analysis that we had asked them to do, which is basically the build out at the 1.35 FAR, split evenly between basically corporate office space and research and development, with 15% allocated for ancillary retail, using the data that the town had collected as well as the data that the state had made available. And he's putting together a schedule for me, but I anticipate that that piece of the work will be done and available for a committee meeting within the next 30 days. So the plan is to get the first piece of the analysis done, which is at that reduced FAR that we had agreed made sense, because I think the original zoning proposal was at 1.75. So we're bringing it down to 1.35, and to see what the ramifications of that modification will be on the key strategic intersections with improvements that are possible. And so, Adam, I think sometime within the next 30 days, we're going to have that. And then following that, the committee can decide, based upon what those results show, what additional scenarios they want to have modeled. Also, as part of that first phase of the work, he is going to be taking a look at a comparison in terms of what the trip generation would be for the commercial uses I've just described versus trip generation that would include a combination of retail and commercial uses. But that second piece of it is not going to be modeled. So I think we're going to have that within the next month, and I'll be reaching out to Kate and the committee to set up a meeting where that data can be presented.
And town meeting won't interfere with our timeline or advance.
Well, it's just a question of when the committee can meet. I mean,
Right.
It's not going to interfere with the consultant's work, and it's not going to really, I don't think, interfere with my work with the consultant. So,
Is there anything that that Marty and I can do with FinCom to kind of keep them engaged and smiling on this matter?
well, I think FinCom is represented on the committee.
Right, I know.
When I put together the RFP on it, it was circulated back to the full committee. FinCom signed off on the scope of work. So I'm anticipating that they're satisfied with the work program that we developed, and that we're on a path that's constructive.
Excellent. I just want to make sure that we can get ahead, of the previous experience. I know that that Ted worked pretty hard to keep FinCom aligned with a shared vision, and and I just want to be mindful of that going forward. And then the last comment that I had was, you may have seen the town is looking to implement some kind of a shop local, dine local campaign. The select board is being very active and supportive, and it's really an effort being led by the chamber for both member and non-member businesses to participate, and they've engaged a local Needham marketing firm to help create this marketing campaign. And I do intend at the CEA meeting to bring it up tomorrow morning. And then, because some of the members on that council are commercial brokers and also represent landlords and tenants in the area that may be able to help and participate, because the wider the participation and engagement, the better off everybody will be, including local Needham businesses. So I just wanted you guys to be aware, that there's something in the works, and it will be rolling out over the course of the next several weeks.
Is that new employee, Amy, going to be involved in that?
Yes, she already has been behind the scenes, and she will continue to be.
Okay.
Okay. I have a quick follow-up question for Lee on the HC1 zoning. Because I happen to have been reviewing minutes of 2 of our July meetings, and I recall the discussion that there was going to be some study of residential use, if only to be able to respond to town meeting members' questions of, did we consider residential?
Right.
You didn't mention that when you were discussing where we are with this, Lee.
Well, we are, I mean, there are going to be 3 scenarios that are modeled. In all 3 cases, though, it's the trip generation that residential would generate is going to be assessed. I was just giving you a description of what's going to be the first component that's modeled, and then there'll be decisions made on the other 2 scenarios to model. And it might be that people decide they want to actually model the residential as opposed to just looking at the trip generation numbers.
Okay, thank you. There'll be 2 other components. Okay.
Yes, there'll be two other scenarios that get modeled. This is the first one. This is the first one that we decided to model.
Okay, good. So if there are no other comments or questions, I will have.
I have a quick question for Adam. There is a Needham Heights Neighborhood Association meeting.
I'm sorry. Yes. Thank you,
So glad
Paul.
you remembered that.
Thank you. So I appreciate you bringing that up. So I think my colleagues know that I'm president of the Needham Heights Neighborhood Association, and had been approached by LCB's attorney, Roy Kramer, to see if we would be interested in hosting a meeting, a community-wide meeting. And I met with the board discussed it, and obviously given that it's directly in the Heights, it is something that we want to participate in. And so we've already begun a marketing outreach to several areas, Facebook and other places on social media, and also to our membership to promote the meeting. So the meeting will be held by Zoom Monday, September 14 at 7 p.m. We may, I think, in 10 minutes in advance, we may address some board matters, but beyond that, the meeting will be all about LCB, their presentation, and then it'll open up questions and comments. I expect the presentation to be maybe 15 minutes, very similar in kind and substance to what they've delivered to us, and there'll be some opportunities for questions and comments. So that's the current plan. Is there anything that you wish me to speak to or not to speak to?
Well, Adam, let me ask you, I can't attend, I have a competing meeting. Would you welcome the attendance of other planning board meetings, other planning board members at the Needham Heights meeting? And would they play any role or just be coming to listen? What are your thoughts?
I'm totally open. I think I may have goofed a little bit in planning this. Perhaps I should have circled back. I remember we had spoken about this, but that it wasn't uncommon for for this kind of thing to to happen. and to
It's
work
just
in.
fine. I'm very, very happy the Needham Heights Neighborhood Association.
I welcome the board would welcome, the participation of any members that are available. Absolutely.
I would like to suggest, whether there are other members of the board there or not, that if there are questions that are really kind of questions directed at the planning board, that we authorize Adam to speak on behalf of the board and to answer those questions.
Mhm.
I would,
Does
Adam's going to be there.
you
And
feel
if somebody
comfortable?
raises a planning board question, he can say, well, as a member of the planning board, let me speak to that.
Does that work for you as sort of the MC as well?
Yes, I don't have a problem being able to do that. I kind of walked a similar line for a previous Needham Heights Association meeting. And yet, if there are any questions that seem to be of a technical or legal basis, what I may do is just get the question and refer back to the board, and then follow up directly, with you guys, and then to be able to form a response to whoever raised a question. If Madam Chair, I feel that it is, beyond my scope, to answer.
Sure.
Or if Roy or Evans are going to be there, they may be able to answer the question.
Yeah.
Right, but they would only be answering it from the applicant's point of view, which
True.
may be a different perspective and point of view of us.
No, I think you have to be careful about what you say representing the planning board. Unless you're absolutely sure of the answer, I think you're right. Be careful, take the question, and we'll bring it back to us and we'll talk about it.
Right.
Yeah, and a question that's asked but not answered can always be answered perhaps after our next meeting in the form of an email that goes out to your members.
Right.
Because the question is posed generally at a meeting by a person, but it seems as though a response would be circulated more generally. So it at least includes those others who came to that meeting.
I'd like to, Alex, if it's okay with you, touch base offline this week and just get a refresh on the timeline of when they appeared and the public hearings that the planning board has had on the matter.
Sure.
Just so I can speak to that if it comes up, because this is obviously not the first time the public has been aware of, of the planning board or the application.
Yeah, I can do a search in the agendas, so I don't have to rely on my own memory, but yeah, totally.
Thanks for your help. It'll be quick.
And also to say that all of these meetings can be accessed through the town's website if anybody wishes to go back and listen to them and watch them. So,
Exactly.
okay.
And in fact, what I may do is get the specific links so we can post them up on the Needham Heights Association website as a reference after the fact. So
Particularly the hearing on the zoning article.
yes, exactly.
Okay, that all sounds good. It sounds like we gave you sufficient guidance, Adam, on the meetings.
I will, Ted, if it's okay with you, I'd like to reach out to you and to Marty and Paul or Jean, offline as well for any more specific direction or guidance you may have.
Sure.
Always.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so it sounds like we're all set with Adam's comment, board member comments. Is there any other such item under board member comments?
Motion to adjourn.
All right.
Second. Oh,
Third made a motion to adjourn. I think it was Mr. Block who made the second.
no, it's Mr. Jacobs.
I beat him to the punch. Yeah.
All right. So the motion has been made and seconded to adjourn. Any discussion? No. All in favor? Mr. Owens,
Aye.
Mr. Block,
Aye.
Mr. Jacobs,
Aye.
Mr. Alper,
Aye.
and the chair is aye, and so we stand adjourned.
Thank you, Gene. Nice job.
Good
Thanks.
meeting.
Good night, everybody.
Good night, everybody.
Just short of 2 hours.